The Canada-U.S. trade relationship is imploding, and the fallout isn't hitting Washington or Ottawa first. It's hitting real people. From California's vineyards to Maine's lobster docks, Trump's proposed tariffs and Canada's silent but devastating boycott are gutting cross-border trade. Billions in exports are at risk. Thousands of jobs hang in the balance. And for 10 key U.S. states, this could be an economic knockout punch. Today, we're counting down the states getting crushed. And number one will absolutely shock you. Before you think this is just politics, ask yourself, what happens when your biggest customer stops buying what you sell? We're about to find out. Number 10, California. Even the crown jewel of America's economy isn't immune. And that should terrify Washington. California's $5 billion wine and produce export empire has just taken a direct hit from Ottawa's boycott of U.S. alcohol and specialty foods. In the rolling hills of Napa Valley, family-run vineyards are calling it the worst Canadian pullout in decades. Some report orders plunging by more than 60% almost overnight. What used to be a proud California reserve on menus in Vancouver and Toronto has been replaced with Australian Shiraz or French Bordeaux, not because they're better, but because they're politically safer. And the pain doesn't stop with the wine glass. Almond orchards in the Central Valley are watching truckloads sit idle. Citrus farmers are scrambling for new buyers. Even Silicon Valley tech exporters, who rely on Canadian retail partners for consumer electronics, are feeling the chill. But here's the real political landmine: Trump's proposed aluminum tariffs. California's aerospace sector, which quietly supplies critical components to Canada's aircraft manufacturers, now faces the possibility of costs skyrocketing, just as global competitors step in to replace them. If California, with its vast markets, diversified economy, and political clout, is taking this much damage, what happens when we get to states whose survival hinges almost entirely on Canadian buyers? Number 9, Texas. Texas isn't just oil wells and cowboy hats. It's the engine room of America's export power. For years, Canada has been its second largest customer, buying over $27 billion worth of Texas goods annually. But now, Ottawa's boycott is slamming the brakes on that trade, and the shockwaves are rattling from Fort Worth ranches to Houston refineries. On the ranching side, it's a gut punch. Canadian grocery chains, once loyal buyers of premium Texas beef, are canceling contracts overnight. Fort Worth ranchers are scrambling to find alternative markets, but with beef prices falling and feed costs rising, margins are getting crushed. Then there's the industrial front. Texas doesn't just produce oil. It builds the backbone of North America's energy network: pipelines, refining equipment, and advanced drilling technology. Those products used to flow freely across the border. Now, with Trump threatening punishing steel tariffs, the cost of making those tools is surging, pricing Texas exporters out of the Canadian market and handing the advantage to foreign competitors in Asia and Europe. The political fallout is just as dangerous. Houston manufacturing plants are quietly laying off workers. Small suppliers, mom-and-pop machine shops that feed into Texas's massive energy supply chain, are watching decades-long Canadian contracts vanish. This is just the start. Subscribe and like to stay ahead. Number 8, Maine. Maine's lobster industry is snapping under Canada's boycott, and coastal towns are feeling it like a nor'easter in July. Lobster exports to Canada have plunged. In fishing villages from Rockland to Stonington, dockside coolers that used to be emptied daily by Canadian buyers are now sitting half full. The boats still go out, the traps still drop. But with no Canadian orders, fishermen are being forced to sell at bargain basement prices just to keep fuel in their tanks. It's not just the docks. The boycott is bleeding into tourism. Fewer Canadians are crossing into Maine for summer vacations, which means fewer hotel bookings, emptier restaurants, and entire Main streets feeling the pinch. Locals say it's the quietest tourist season they've seen in years, and that's before Trump's aluminum tariffs hit. Those tariffs are hitting Maine's boat builders hard. These are the craftsmen who build the lobster boats and fishing vessels that Canadians buy every year. With aluminum prices spiking, orders are being delayed or canceled outright. The result? Skilled shipyard workers are being sent home early, and small-town economies are taking on water fast. At number 7, Michigan's economy isn't just linked to Canada. It's practically welded to it. The auto industry here isn't a domestic industry at all. It's a binational assembly line. A car built in Detroit might have its transmission from Windsor, its electronics from Toronto, and its steel from Hamilton. For decades, that border was just a line on a map. Now, thanks to Ottawa's boycott and Trump's tariff threats, it's becoming a choke point. Canadian dealerships, once some of the biggest buyers of U.S.-made cars, are quietly slashing orders. Why? Because tariffs on steel and aluminum could add $2,000 to $4,000 to the price of every new vehicle, making them a tough sell north of the border. In Detroit, this isn't just a number on a spreadsheet. It's visible on the ground. Assembly lines at Ford, GM, and Stellantis plants are slowing down. Not because Americans aren't buying, but because Canadian orders are drying up like a Michigan riverbed in August. And here's the political flashpoint. Michigan is a swing state. Union leaders are furious. Governors are calling Washington, demanding answers. But neither Ottawa nor the White House is blinking. The trade war is now parked right in the heart of the Rust Belt, and every stalled production line is another political powder keg in an election year. Number 6, Florida sunshine doesn't pay the bills, and Florida's feeling the storm. For decades, this state's secret weapon wasn't just oranges or beaches, it was Canada's snowbirds. Tens of thousands of retirees from Ontario, Quebec, and beyond flocked south every winter, bringing with them wallets fat with Canadian dollars. They didn't just rent condos. They bought homes, tipped generously in restaurants, and pumped millions into Florida's economy every single season. But this year, many of those long-term visitors are gone. It's not the weather that's keeping them away. It's the political climate. With Ottawa pushing a Buy Canadian boycott and tensions flaring over Trump's tariff threats, retirees who once called Miami or Naples their second home are choosing Mexico, the Caribbean, or even staying put. Entire condo complexes that used to be booked solid with Canadian license plates are now half empty. And it's not just tourism. Florida's agricultural backbone, citrus, tomatoes, peppers, has always had a strong market in Canada. But Canadian importers are now going local or buying from Latin America, bypassing U.S. producers entirely. Some Florida growers report their export orders have fallen by nearly 50% in just a matter of months. The White House isn't backing down on tariffs, and Ottawa isn't lifting its boycott. Florida, a crucial swing state, is now caught between a diplomatic feud and an economic freefall, and both parties know it could tip the balance in 2026 and 2028 elections. If this feels close to home, hit subscribe, because the next state might be yours. That keeps the countdown rhythm intact. Number 5, Ohio. Ohio has always been a manufacturing heavyweight, the kind of state where the hum of assembly lines is as familiar as the sound of Friday night football crowds. But right now, that hum is turning into a dangerous silence. The state's economy is being hit from both flanks. On one side, Trump's tariffs on steel and aluminum are driving up raw material costs, making it more expensive for Ohio's factories to build everything from car doors to industrial pumps. On the other, Canada, one of Ohio's biggest trading partners, is slashing orders for machinery, plastics, and auto parts in direct retaliation. In Toledo, plants that once ran round-the-clock double shifts for Canadian clients are now dimming the lights early. Cleveland's industrial corridor, once a symbol of the Rust Belt's comeback, is facing furloughs and quiet layoffs. For a state that clawed its way back from manufacturing decline in the early 2000s, this feels like déjà vu with a political twist. Union leaders are furious. They argue that workers are being caught in a trade war crossfire they didn't start. "We're not pawns on some international chessboard," one union rep told reporters. But in Washington, tariffs remain a key bargaining chip. And in Ottawa, the boycott is a political statement, which means Ohio's skilled machinists and welders are paying the price for a feud decided in capital cities hundreds of miles away. Number 4. Pennsylvania, a state forged in steel and steeped in farmland, now finds both of its economic pillars under siege. From the blast furnaces of Pittsburgh to the rolling dairy fields of Lancaster, the Canada-U.S. trade freeze is cutting deep. Canadian construction firms, once steady buyers of Pennsylvania steel, are slamming the brakes on orders. Why? Trump's tariffs have driven up prices so sharply that Canadian builders can now source cheaper steel from Europe or Asia, bypassing Pennsylvania entirely. And if you drive 2 hours east into dairy country, the picture isn't any brighter. Specialty cheeses, butter, and milk powders that once filled Canadian supermarket shelves are now sitting in cold storage, unsold. Ottawa's retaliatory tariffs have made Pennsylvania dairy a luxury item north of the border, and most Canadian consumers are simply walking past it. What's remarkable here is the unlikely alliance forming. Rural farmers and urban steelworkers, two groups that rarely share the same political stage, are suddenly fighting the same battle. They're united by a single frustration. Their livelihoods are being weaponized in a political standoff they can't control. State lawmakers are under intense pressure. Pennsylvania isn't just an industrial hub, it's a swing state. Anger here can tilt national politics. If the White House loses Pennsylvania over trade policy, it could rewrite the electoral map. Number 3. New York. New York isn't just skyscrapers and stock tickers. It's one of America's most vital trade gateways to Canada. Every day, billions in goods flow through Buffalo, Niagara Falls, and Champlain, forming an economic artery between the two nations. But now, that artery is starting to clog. From the crisp apples of the Hudson Valley to high-tech medical devices built in Rochester, Canadian orders that once moved on autopilot are suddenly stalled. Ottawa's boycott has flipped the switch. Contracts are frozen, shipments canceled, and warehouses are starting to feel the pinch. And it's not just upstate agriculture or manufacturing taking the hit. Wall Street is quietly sounding alarms. Less trade means less cross-border investment, fewer joint ventures, and a slowdown in corporate mergers that once depended on healthy U.S. Canada relations. For New York's financial sector, that's not just a local problem. It's a signal that the international investment climate is shifting. Politically, this couldn't be more explosive. New York's leadership has been pressuring Washington to resolve the trade dispute, warning that the state's role as a global economic hub is at risk. The governor's office has already called emergency roundtables with business leaders, hoping to stop what some insiders are calling a slow bleed of opportunity to Canadian trade partners in Europe and Asia. And here's where the curiosity spikes. Canada isn't just cutting New York out. They're redirecting key import contracts to rival ports in New Jersey and Boston. That means New York could lose long-term logistical dominance, even if the boycott ends. If this shocked you, hit subscribe right now, because your subscription powers us to dig even deeper and uncover the truths others won't talk about. Number 2. Illinois. Illinois isn't just farmland. It's the beating heart of America's grain and pork export machine. From the vast soybean fields of central Illinois to the massive pork processing plants in the south, this state feeds millions, and Canada has always been one of its hungriest customers. But now, those orders are drying up at a pace that's turning heads in Springfield and Washington alike. For decades, Canadian buyers have been locking in huge contracts for Illinois corn, soybeans, and pork. Those deals kept rail cars full, river barges moving, and entire rural towns alive. But with Ottawa's boycott in full swing, those shipments are shrinking. In some farming counties, export volumes to Canada have dropped by double digits in just a few months, numbers that usually take years to slide. Chicago's rail hubs and the Mississippi River ports are built for a constant flow of cross-border trade. Slow that down and the shockwaves hit everyone. Lobbyists in Chicago are pressuring Congress, calling the boycott a direct threat to America's food security. Meanwhile, Canada's exit is opening the door to Asian buyers. But with slimmer margins and tougher terms, Illinois may soon be working harder for less profit. Number 1. Minnesota. Here's the real shocker. The state topping this list isn't one most people would guess. Minnesota's economic lifeblood runs straight into Canada's veins, from the iron ore mined in the Mesabi Range to the precision medical devices engineered in Minneapolis labs. For decades, this was a seamless partnership. Canadian steelmakers relied on Minnesota's ore, and Canadian hospitals stocked their shelves with Minnesota-made technology. But now, that partnership is cracking. Tariffs are inflating production costs, Canada's boycott is severing contracts, and some manufacturers are whispering the unthinkable: permanent shutdowns. Union leaders in the Iron Range are warning that once those mines go idle, they may never reopen, and skilled workers could scatter for good. Politically, Minnesota's congressional delegation is furious, calling the situation an economic betrayal of America's heartland. Behind closed doors, state trade officials are scrambling to court new buyers in Europe and Asia. But Minnesota's products are so specialized, there's no quick fix. Every month without Canadian orders is another month closer to irreversible damage. And here's the question no one in Washington seems ready to answer. What happens when the state that builds Canada's steel and saves Canadian lives decides it can't afford to keep the lights on? The damage is here, and it's spreading. Is Washington protecting American pride or killing American paychecks? Is Canada defending its future or blowing up the bridge between two allies? Let us know in the comments, hit like, share, and subscribe, because this fight is just getting started.